Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated Leilui Nishmat, Ruth Orfali Bat Adela, sponsored by our family, for the Refuah Shlema of Haim Fel Ben Frida and the Yashua Zav Fortuné, and for the continued health of Chana Bat Fega. In loving memory, Leilui Nishmat, great uncle Hiram Hadid, Haim and Sophia Lavashon, sponsored by Gail and Sunny Hadid. And as well, the learning for this week is dedicated by the Torah Center Silver Donors Sarah and Shai Mahani in celebration of the birth of their son, Herschel, Mahani, Simantov, and Mabruk. Beautiful. Okay, let us begin. So I just want to share a very interesting nexus of a few different perspectives that I think coalesce together on the concept of Naton Titen Lo, which means that a person should be giving Tzedakah in the right way and with the right heart and with the right approach. So I want to share one fascinating idea. First of all, when the Torah tells you Naton Titen, give, you should surely give. The Torah tells you Petawach Tiftach, open your hand, you shall surely open. The Pasuk tells you Aser Ta'aseg, make sure that you tithe. In each of these cases, a person might be thinking to themselves, well, you know something, at the end of the day, it's enough to tell me once to give. To tell me twice is excessive. I need to worry about my children, I need to worry about my future, I need to worry about a lot of things. However, the Chachamim actually saw in Tzedakah a very different aspect, and I want to just share the depth of this concept with you together today. Famously, the word for giving in the Torah is venatenu, which means and they will give. It's experienced in the giving of the Jewish people to the collection for the Bet HaMikdash. And the Chachamim point out that the word venatenu is a word which is a palindrome, and it is read in both directions. So venatenu, vav nun taf nun vav, you'll give. And understand venatenu, vav nun taf nun vav, it reads exactly the same backwards to illustrate that what a person gives, they will receive in return. In fact, the Gemara makes this derasha specifically on aser ta'aser, not tithe, you shall surely tithe 2 times, but rather aser, give 10%, kedei shetit asher, in order that you should become wealthy, in order that you should increase your own profits. So this is one of those beautiful counterintuitive things that the Torah tries to get us to shift our perspective on. For most of us, we have this idea that the more money that you give away, the less money you have. The Torah says it may look that way, but it's not actually the case. The more money you give away, the more money you have. Now, that's a shocking thing to say. Let me explain why. Normally, when the Torah redirects the way we think, the Torah says, listen, you're going to have less money, but it's worth it. You can have less money, but that's the point of money, to give it away. You can have less money, but you'll get reward in the world to come. Here the Torah is not saying that. The Torah is saying, give money, you'll get more money. That's literally what the Torah is communicating. And that's a fascinating thing. So much so that we've mentioned many times before, that the Torah actually tells us that on every other thing, a person is not allowed to test God, like the Pasuk says, Lo tenasun et Hashem Elokechem, do not test your God. Rather, when it comes to this mitzvah, of all the mitzvot in the Torah, the Pasuk says, Bechanuni na bazot, test me in this, please, says God, test me. See if when you give more tzedakah, if your money is not protected, if you're not going to earn more in the long run. Test me. You're allowed to actually mention and say before you give the money, I want to see how it's going to work. I'm giving this money in order to be able to see that Hashem is rewarding me in return. However, as the Gemara tells us, this concept is not something that always comes back in a linear fashion. There was an amazing example of this that took place during this the war that we're currently in Eretz Israel. There was a fellow who has a big family, 6 or 7 kids, living in Eretz Israel near the border. Anyway, he has a brother-in-law who has a small apartment, but the brother-in-law's apartment was inland, and not only was it more inland than Eretz Israel, it also had a mamad. What's a mamad? It had a protected room, a safe room where people could hide. So even though one of the brothers-in-law had a big family, but he was more wealthy, but he lived near the border, it wasn't safe, so he calls his brother-in-law and says, listen, They're sending rockets. I don't know what to do. We don't have a safe room in my building. Would it be okay if we came with the family? Of course, the brother-in-law said, sure, you're welcome to come. Don't even think about it. And don't come for a day or two. Pack enough clothes, be here for 2 weeks until everything dies down. You'll come and you'll stay with us. Anyway, the brother-in-law is very thankful. They come, they're driving on their way down. The wife turns to her husband and she says, that's so nice of you that you offered. She says, but you know, we're barely making it. We can't afford the rent. We don't have really enough money to be able to pay for our own groceries. Now you're going to invite someone in. Not only are we feeding, 9 extra mouths here in the house, but also, when you're at home by yourself, you eat whatever you want. When you have guests and company, you have to make the meals need to be a little bit more spicy. You're not going to make grilled cheese for your guests, but you might make grilled cheese for yourself. Yesterday morning, I had breakfast. For breakfast, I had cereal. Imagine telling your guests here, I'm offering you for breakfast cereal. You want to get them bagels, and you want to get them eggs, and you want to get them cream cheese and tuna fish, right? Because it's a guest. So the wife says, where are we going to have this from? We've been putting money away. We don't have enough room for our own family. We're trying to figure things out. We need to expand. We've been putting money away for this. What's going to happen to our savings? The husband says to her, he says, listen, right now I know that there's a mitzvah on the table of hachnasat orchim. Right now I know that they're family and they have nowhere to go. And they need to be safe, and they need to be calm, and they need to be secure. First we'll do the mitzvah. Later on we'll figure out how we're going to pay for it. He goes around to a friend, borrows some money, starts stocking the house for what's going to be a 2-week stay with his in-laws. Anyway, the 2 weeks they pass in a flash. They take care of them so beautifully. They set the table. They welcome them in with open hearts. The family is hiding together in the room, crying together, hugging each other. It's a beautiful time, but after a while, after the 2 weeks are over, the family gets, the all clear rings in the sirens, and they pack into their car and they drive home. Well, that afternoon, the afternoon that they left, all of a sudden there's a leak in the floor. There's water accumulating on the floor. They try and figure out what it is. They can't see where it's coming from. They call a plumber. The plumber comes and he breaks the charsina, he breaks the tiles, and he can see there's a busted pipe, and the pipe is filling the kitchen with water. His wife turns to him and she says, this is the reward. We just had them for 2 weeks. On the day that they left, we didn't hold back. We borrowed money to be able to host them. And this is the reward you're talking about. Hashem will take care of it. What's going on? Husband turns to his wife, he gives a shrug of his shoulders. He says, I have the same questions you have. I'm just not saying them out loud. Right? He says, we have faith in Hashem. Hashem has a plan. He always has a plan. Well, as the plumber comes, it's going to cost them now 1,000 shekel to fix the pipe and to seal the tiles again. He opens up the floor and he's digging around the pipe to be able to situate the new pipe in the correct way. And as he's knocking on the floor, all of a sudden, the floor starts to crack. The guy can't believe it. He says, your floor is cracking now. He says, my floor's cracking. From the water? He says, no, not from the water, it's dry. He says, are you kidding me? Anyway, he says, so open it up. I guess it's dangerous. His wife gives him the rolls. She rolls the eyes. Now we have a hole in the floor underneath the pipes. The guy comes. He starts knocking. All of a sudden, he says, I don't know how to tell you this. He says, but you're the ground floor. There's no foundation under your apartment. He said, what do you mean there's no foundation? We're the bottom floor. There's no one underneath us. He says, all I'm telling you is under the floor is air. I don't know what's going on with your apartment. They open up another section of the floor. He shines a light into the floor. He looks down, and all he can see is darkness. The guy says it's going to be another 5,000 shekel. I got to go down. I got to see what to do. I got to seal it. The wife is like, oh. Well, they lower this man into the hole underneath the floor, underneath the pipe. underneath the leak that sprung on the day that their guests finally left. And the man lowers himself down using all the equipment into this hole to see what's going on. And all of a sudden he shouts up, he says, "You're not going to believe this." And you hear the echoes, "You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this." It's not just a hole underneath the apartment. It is a massive space. When I read it, I also thought it was going to be a Hamas tunnel. It wasn't. It was not a treasure. It turns out that when they built this building all those years ago, the kablan who built the building, tried to build an underground parking structure illegally. But because he did not have the permits, the city did not allow him to use the parking structure. So the guy felt, I built this parking structure, I can't use it. I can't sell the apartments based on the fact that there's a parking structure. Okay, I'll seal it up. Meanwhile, this guy now has direct access from his apartment to an enormous amount of space, which he then converts into a house the size of his own whole house and then some. The kablan, the people of the building find out that this guy just got basically an entire new apartment size for free to be able to build for his children, for his grandchildren, for free. And they start complaining and they say, "What's going on here? You says that you just discovered this space, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to all of us." They take him to court. In court, the court calls the kablan. The kablan says, "Listen, I don't know how to say this to you," he says. "The truth is the space is mine. I sold all the apartments. No one paid for a parking spot. I didn't even advertise it because I couldn't use them. The only point of access to this spot is the hole that was just made in this fellow's. So I can't sell it. There's nothing I could do with it. What am I going to do? Sell it to someone else and build him a door in the floor of this guy's apartment?" Right? He says, so I'm happy to give it to him as a gift. As a gift, he receives an entire new apartment. Apartment too small. Where the question was, there's not enough space. Hashem says, "You squished? Let me show you how much space there is." I love the idea that in Aser Ta'aser, there's not only the Haftacha, the promise, that you gave 10 and now God will give you another 10. But rather, Aser Bishvil Shitit Asher, from within what you already have. There's a beracha, an expansiveness in the parnasah that a person has, in the opportunities that a person has. God doesn't need to give you something else in order to make you richer from what you already have. And I think, as we say, as the pasuk says, Birkat Amunai Hita Ashir, the blessing of God will bring wealth. Sometimes the blessing itself is already present within our lives, and it's just not yet revealed. Now, there's a fascinating question that's asked, a philosophical conundrum, if you will. We know that God has the most unbelievable gift. His gift is that He already knows everything that's going to happen. Right? Hashem already knows what you're going to do. Ask the philosophers, the Rishonim. If God already knows what you're going to do, what is the purpose of giving a person tests in their life? Giving them challenges to see if they'll pass those challenges. God already knows before you got the challenge how you were going to react to the challenge. So what's the purpose of creating a person if your answer to that is to be able to see how the person's going to react? Hashem already knows that. So God could create, Hashem could create the world, give you whatever He wants to give you, not have you pay for it, because you know why? Hashem already knows instantaneously what you would do if you had the choice. And the answer the Chachamim give is that it's true. But that emet only lives in God's knowledge, in God's knowing of what you will do. But the actualization of your actions only happens when you do it. So in a certain effect, a mitzvah is the actualization, the realization of the Torah that a person has inside of them, the knowledge of what to do, the will that they have of their sechel, of their neshama, to choose to do the right thing, brought out into the real world. That's what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is a mixture of these two things. The knowledge that I have, plus the will that I have to be able to do and to act based on that knowledge, not based on my desires or my whims or my ta'avot. If that's the case, then what we're looking at over here says the pasuk, Naton titen lo. Give, you shall surely give to him. Aser ta'aser. Patoach tiftach. Really what God is telling you is, I know what you're going to do. I know you're going to petach. Naton titen. I know you're going to give. Aser, I know you're going to give maaser. But you have to go through the motions, the action of doing what Hashem already knows, the action of which expresses the will that I have in the real world. And when I bring that out, you know what happens? In the revelation of that thing, the beracha that was also already there is brought out, is revealed, is actualized. It's taken from the world of potential to the world of asiyah, the world of achievement, and it's experienced and it's felt in this world. Now, my friends, the good things that happen to you are good for you. The bad things that happen for you are also good for you. So what's the difference in the good things and the bad things? And the answer is that one is revealed good and one is hidden good. When a person chooses to be able to express the goodness of their neshama by doing these mitzvot in the proper way, by going above and beyond and taking the things that are difficult for me to do and transferring them into the world of action, what I'm doing also is I take my life's berachot, which are hidden, manifested in difficulty, in challenge, and what do? I turn them around. The pasuk says something very interesting about the nature of Hakadosh Baruch Hu's chesed. As we know, Hakadosh Baruch Hu's kindness oftentimes is really is difficult to see. And I want to share an example that I saw brought down that really made an impact on me on this lesson of the kindness of Hashem and how sometimes it appears. The pasuk says, Chesed Adonai male'ah haaretz. The kindness of God fills the earth. The Chachamim point out that the first letters, the Rashi Tevot of those words, Chesed Amonai male'ah haaretz, the kindness of God fills the earth, is the letters that spell the word Chet, Yud, Mem, Hey. What does that spell? Chema. What is chema in Hebrew? Anger. Chema is anger. Sometimes God's expression of kindness with us manifests as what? As chema, as anger. How do we know? How do we decide? How do we dictate? How do we change the chesed that God is doing to us, which manifests as anger? So as an example, a person might lose all of their money, and they think it's the worst thing ever. But actually, their money, losing their money was a kapara, instead of losing a child, bar minan, or losing one's health. So the chema experienced, the anger that I'm experiencing from Hashem, the wrath, is actually an expression of chesed. What we're learning over here is Hashem says, Patoach tiftach, naton titen, aser ta'aser. I have an opportunity of changing the hidden chema, which is chesed, into a revealed chesed through the process of exhibited kindness in my own life and in my own world. So sometimes, really, what we need to do to experience this beracha is not to ask for more, but to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, the runway to reveal his cards. There was once a man who was running a falafel stand. Now, this man is sitting there, ready to serve up the most delicious Israeli snack, falafel. Guy walks in, and as you know, if you've been to Israel, you see the guy immediately slices like a pro, slices the top of the pita. He's got it in the thing. He goes, "Nu." Anyway, the guy says, "Ta rotze falafel?" He goes, "Ken, sim." He puts the falafel balls. He goes, "Salat?" "Sim, sim, sim." "Melafafonim?" "Sim." "Amba?" "Sim, sim, sim." "Tahina?" "Sim." "Hummus?" "Sim." "Chatzilim metuganim?" "Sim." "Chips?" "Sim." Just for any of you who have no idea what's going on, that wasn't me having a seizure. That was just a lot of Hebrew. The guy is asking him, "Do you want the falafel balls?" He says, "Sim, put. Put. You want tahina? Put. Amba, put. Hakol, put. Sim. Anyway, the guy finally finishes the falafel. He hands it to him. The guy walks off to have pays his money, goes to have his... Anyway, guy's sitting there all day long. All he could think of, this guy, who all he knew how to say was, Sim. He gets to the synagogue, and he's praying the Amidah, and all of a sudden he gets to the part of the Amidah, and he says, Sim, Shalom, Tova, Bracha, Chaim, Chen, V'chesed. And all of a sudden he realizes that every one of us is this person standing in front of Hashem, and Hashem's got the falafel open, and he's like, "What do you want?" With the tongues. And we're like, Sim, Shalom, Sim. All we want is for Hashem to put everything in our lives. But suddenly when someone comes and he says, "Put something in my life, in my hand," all of a sudden we have all these rationalizations. All of a sudden, if a guy said to you, "Can I have $5?" and you gave it to him, and he says, "Could I have another $5?" what do you say? Chutzpah. How about if he says, "Can I have another $5?" You tell him, "Listen, you already asked for 3 things." The guy's like, "Could I have another?" How many sims did we put in our Amidah? Says the Pasuk, Hashem tells every Jew, "I know you're going to ask me for a lot of things. And I know that you're not going to deserve them. So let me teach you how you can ask me and ask me and ask me and ask me for things." If you go find your brother, and when your brother asks you for something, the answer is yes. And when he asks you for more, the answer is yes. And even if there's 3 or 4 or 5 of them in the minyan, the answer is yes. Then when a person comes to Hashem and he says, Birkat Hashem ita ashir, the blessing of God is what gives you money, Hashem says, "Yeah, but you asked me already. I gave you already." And Hashem will say, "There was already 10 people here this morning. I can't give everybody." Aser ta'aser, naton titen, patoach tiftach. As the Pasuk says, that when a person does that, ki biglal hadavar hazeh, because of this thing, yivarecha Hashem elokecha, Hashem will bless you, b'chol ma'asecha, in all of your deeds, in all of your actions, u'b'chol mishlach yadecha, and in everything you send your hand to. What does biglal hadavar hazeh mean? Normally the way we translate that is, because of the tzedakah that you gave. I'd like to suggest that maybe biglal hadavar hazeh here is not because you gave. It's because you doubled down. Giving one time is your obligation. Giving the second time says, "I don't have to. I want to." If we give once, then God says, "You gave what you had to. I don't have to." But in the naton titen, in the aser ta'aser, in the patoach tiftach, Ki biglal hadavar hazeh. Because of the doubling down. Because you didn't have to, and you did. I'll also give you when I didn't have to, and I will did. Hashem should bless us to be able to have all the berachot that we need to find within the context of tefillah, and it should come to us because we were able to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we understand what the value of giving is, and we give even when it's a little difficult, even when we've already given, even when there's been so many. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.